Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Southeast Radio.
Welcome back to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with me, Karl Fitzpatrick. Well, patientMpower has received acclaim in both Ireland and the US, recently receiving funding from the government's Disruptive Technologies Innovation Fund. The founder of the company, Eamonn Costello, joins me now to discuss this innovative platform in greater detail. Eamonn, we'll be discussing your business patientMpower, but before we get there, I'd like to delve into your first career, because it's a world away from the healthcare sector.
Yeah, I suppose it's very different. So my background was in telecoms, in research and development with British Telecom. That was my first job many years ago at this stage. And I suppose, throughout my kind of various roles in telecoms, I always wanted to get closer to the customer needs. So I worked in telecoms, I suppose, for the guts of kind of 15 years. And then I took a move into e-commerce, running product teams, running sales teams. And so that led me kind of in towards kind of the startup world and kind of wanting to kind of get involved with something more innovative and, kind of see how companies start and see how they progress in kind of building their customer base.
So talk to us about the circumstances which triggered the idea for patientMpower.
So I was working in an e-commerce company in the UK, in London. And around that time, my dad became unwell and I decided to quit the job and kind of move back to Ireland. And kind of going in and out of hospital, that with my mum and dad, I saw an awful lot kind of, what's good about the healthcare system, but also what doesn't work about the healthcare system. And it's amazing that, people are confronted with kind of very difficult diagnosis and chronic diseases. And then they're discharged from hospital, and there's no way for patients to communicate back to the hospital for them to perform measurements at home. And it really struck me that there was kind of a need for this type of solution or this type of technology.
So what specifically is patientMpower and how does it work?
So patientMpower, we specialize in providing tools to patients to self-manage their chronic disease at home, but also to engage in research trials. We specialize in lung and kidney disease, and we're involved in some pretty major lung disease studies in the US and the UK. And we're also working with some prestigious hospitals in helping patients stay out of the hospital. So rather than be going into the hospital for routine appointments, they can perform measurements at home. The doctors and nurses can see those measurements remotely, and then it frees up capacity within the hospital. So it's better for the patient and better for the hospital.
And how many hospitals are you currently working with?
So we're currently working with about 10. There's 3 in the US that we're working with. We're working with a couple in the UK. And then we're working with various hospitals in Ireland, mainly on research studies today. And we're hoping to break into the German market this year.
And how has the business been received by the medical sector to date?
So I think in general, the doctors and nurses are very receptive towards it. But in general, in healthcare, it is the nature of the industry and what they do. It's, they're very slow to change. And some of that's for very good reasons that, when they're introducing kind of new technologies or new services, they want to validate it and make sure that it delivers the required improvements, and that's not harmful for patients. But in general, it's slow. Some of the reason for the slowness you can understand, but sometimes it's kind of general bureaucracy that's within healthcare.
And in terms of the decision making itself within the hospital, how much of that is made by the procurement department versus the doctors and nurses?
I think generally the decision or the decision making to do something will be by the senior doctors, and then I suppose they need to create kind of a business case to kind of introduce a new technology or to try out a new technology or service. But then I suppose after that, it varies in different countries depending on kind of the level of service they want to deploy. It will go into procurement rules and tendering. Overall, from kind of starting a conversation and trying to build kind of a case for doing something, it can definitely be kind of, a year, 2 years in terms of a lead time to getting anything deployed.
And is patientMpower involved in any medical trials at present? And perhaps you can provide us with an insight into the company's role in such trials.
Yeah, so we're involved in a good few trials. In some cases, we're a technology layer helping researchers capture data. So a really good example of what we're doing there is a clinical study we're working on with University of Nottingham NHS, and they're managing trial sites across the NHS. So in that study, we're helping them capture home lung function testing for patients in a lung disease called pulmonary fibrosis. And this would be where patients use the patientMpower app and they blow into a device that connects with our app to measure how much capacity is in their lungs. But in other areas, we're actually doing clinical trials to actually validate the effect of our own solution. One such area in kidney dialysis, we've done one clinical trial and we've got plans for other clinical trials later this year, where we're developing technology and we're going to be looking for reimbursement from the healthcare system based on the outcomes of those trials.
Perhaps you can provide us with an insight into how you funded this to date.
The main expenditure in our business is really, the knowledge side of it. So kind of wages for people. The other kind of capital side would be for the hardware that connects to our systems for patients to perform the tests at home. Thus far, we've self-funded the business. We're nearly 5 years in operation and it's been entirely self-funded. And that's mainly through a mix of kind of, the directors of the business loaning the company money, but then also a mix of revenues. So we've had kind of fairly substantial revenues. And then also grants and awards that we've had. Most notably, we won a grant in the US of $250,000 in a competition called the IPF Catalyst Challenge.
And on the subject of funding, last month patientMpower was announced as a winner of the government's Disruptive Technologies Innovation Fund. What did this process entail and how do you plan to utilise this funding?
So it was a pretty intensive process. You have to form partnerships with academia, with research organisations and then other companies. So we've been developing our ideas in kidney dialysis that I mentioned earlier over the last couple of years, and we've linked up with the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, Beaumont Hospital, and another technology company in Cork called 60 to really transform how patients self-manage in kidney dialysis. So across the consortium, we've been awarded €2.1 million in funding to develop really disruptive technology and to trial that technology and to hopefully kind of generate a lot of jobs, both in patientMpower and in 60. And the outcomes of that will be doing clinical trials both in Ireland, the US and the UK to get this product launched and to create kind of an export market for us, both in Europe and the US.
And in terms of geographical expansion, how important will the UK and US markets be to the company's growth globally?
It'll be incredibly important because the nature of what we do, if we were just focusing on the Irish market, it really wouldn't be a big enough market for us. So the US market probably our number one target for a couple of reasons. One, the equivalent of the Department of Health in the US has really earmarked kidney disease as a major focus area. And that's primarily because it's one of the few areas in the US that there is universal coverage in healthcare in the US. So most people will be familiar, the US system has very poor access for a lot of people. But for kidney dialysis, everyone gets access to it. So as a result, they've huge costs in this area in the US, and they want to transform how it's delivered. So we think our technology will be key in empowering that, and that's why we're seeing the US as a key market for us.
And will you be looking for the remit of patientMpower to extend beyond lung and kidney disease? And if so, are you actively researching new uses for the platform?
So we are researching new uses for the platform, and we have one in the pipeline, but we predominantly focus on more underserved kind of niche medical areas. So, for example, a lot of people will focus on diabetes care, which has a huge cost and is a big problem area in the health service. But that'll be an area that we won't look at. So we're always looking for areas that are a bit more underserved in terms of technology solutions. But yes, there's a big enough market that we can go after. So
what's next in your pipeline in that respect?
So one area we're looking at is an area called dystonia. So there, patients will have kind of different types of spasms or different types of issues to do with this neurological kind of disorder. So we're looking to develop something in this area during this year, and we're actively kind of reaching out to patient groups to help with that development.
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was Eamonn Costello from patientMpower, and I look forward to watching the company's upward trajectory throughout 2020.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Southeast.